Hey there, this is Chris, CE.Simgof. I'm going to make what I hope is a fairly brief video, something I should have done a while ago. I'm going to call this the workflow video. I'm going to show you kind of how I think about the process of getting meshes from Blender, once they're complete, meshed and formed to terrain, into Unity, and then kind of how I go through setting my materials and thinking about how I'm going to manage them and do the vertex painting and all of that. This is going to be a little different than the way the set mesh material and the general none to done series goes, the way that the tools were kind of intended to be used, and they work incredibly well that way. But there are some things that I do that they get in the way of a little bit, or that they just it just works a little better to do it this way, avoids some little hiccups and some strange things that can happen if you use set mesh. So I'm going to assume that you have all the basic knowledge of how to set up your splining, your FBX export from Blender. Once you've already conformed your meshes are drugged into your scene, into a mesh folder, and everything is set up with its default materials, the materials that it comes into with. So if you click on one of the splines, one of the FBX files, like this water one, you see it comes in with a grayed out water-based lake that is what's included in the actual FBX. So if you were to look at where the FBX is in your assets down here, you can see they all come in with an embedded material. That's what comes directly from Blender. So you can see in there, you've got your water base. It comes out of Blender with that, and once it gets into Unity, it just brings it with. So this would be the place where you would do set mesh. And if we were to do that and take a look at what it gives you when you do that, normally you're going to go up to the menus and do set mesh on everything. You can also do set mesh just on an individual one. I'm going to do that right now. So I'm going to right click. You have to do it in your hierarchy. You can't do it in the window. And you can do set default materials there. That's going to give you right here your default OPCD material that it sets for that. And it's going to add some components to that FBX. You've got your vertex colors, show vertex colors. You've got your collider, and it sets your physics as deep rough. That's part of the default setup for that. It's also going to add something called the mesh channel materials store script. Now, I'm going to be honest. I'm more of a Blender guy. I'm pretty good in Unity because I have learned to be, but I don't understand everything about Unity or anything about scripting. So what I've experienced, and I could be wrong on this, is that this script, it helps to do the blends. So what it's going to do is it's going to look for, once you do the default materials, it's going to look for one material to another, and by hitting update materials, it's going to go through its scripting, and it's going to change your materials to match them up and blend them. So if you were to make a change to your water-based lake, and then it no longer blends perfectly, because this blend shape that we don't have a material on right now, because this hasn't changed, by hitting update materials, it goes through, it looks, it says it wants to do a lake base to a deep rough, and it's going to change materials appearance in this blend shape to match them. What I've experienced is sometimes I believe it's that script does some things I don't want it to do in the process of things I am working on. So the way I do things and the way I usually combine shapes in Blender, change how I blend things. If you watch my other videos, and I hope you do, I'm painting and I am setting up blends that are manual so that they don't happen automatically, but there are more flexibility. But if I use set default materials and I have this mesh channel materials store script involved, sometimes that's going to screw up the blends that I do manually. It tries to match them up in a way that it thinks they're supposed to be, but I don't want them that way, and sometimes it seems to overwrite what I'm trying to do. Therefore, I don't use set default materials on stuff. So I'm going to pause quick and I'm going to delete some of this stuff, and then we're going to go back to my method. All right, so now we're back to the way it was when it first came in, right? We have our embedded material that came from Blender. Nothing else is involved here, right? So first step in my workflow, the way to get materials onto something. There are different ways you can do this. You can just simply drag and drop things on. So I could just go in here and I have created these materials, And I'm not going to go through over how I create materials in this too much, but once you have your materials created, you can just drag them in and drop them, okay? So that's one way to do it. You just drag them straight onto it. You can also drag into, let's see, so if that's selected over in your inspector, you see you've got materials, element 0. You can also drag straight to there. That's another way to do it. But part of the nice thing about set mesh, obviously, is it does all materials in your scene at once. I can't do it quite as quick as that without a script, but what you can do is you've got this search bar up here. You can search by any text and it will show just that in your scene. So if you look at all my water bases have this water base lake, and some have mesh and some have blend, right? So what I would do, let's do this as a let's look at it as from a fairway standpoint. It's just a little easier. So here's a fairway. You can see there's two different ways that these get named. You have fairway, these underscores mesh, and then the blend shape is fairway underscores blend. So if we wanted to set our fairway material on every fairway, not just have to find everyone and drag in there, we can search up here. And if we just start fairway, it's going to show us all of both the fairway meshes and the fairway blends. But if we were to just add mesh, now this is every fairway in my entire scene. Now I can select all of these like that, and if they're all correct and all your materials in Blender were not adjusted and set up right, you'll see over here, this is showing the inspector for all of them. And you can see materials, element, and it doesn't have anything shown there, but you can just go in here, drag your fairway material to that, and it will add the fairway material to every single fairway in your scene. So you can imagine you can do that with each individual shape. And yes, it takes a little longer than it does to use set mesh, but it is a way to do it pretty fast. So then, for instance, you could go to, you can erase that, then you go to green mesh, spell it right, and then you've got all your green meshes. So you'd select all of these, and then you drag in your green. Same thing with blends. Instead of writing mesh at the end, write blend. Then you've got all your blends. So now I manually create my blend shapes as well. I know that's kind of crazy, but I do it. So then you just drag in your blend fairway or blend green onto the material store for that. So that's how I quickly go through getting my materials onto everything. But there are other things set mesh does and other components that you need in a spline that we need to do manually as well. So first of all, let's go look at one that I've already done here. We're going to look at this base over here. You're going to see this material looks different. That's because I have, if I show Vertex Painting, I've already done the vertex colors this way. All right. Now, the other things that you have that you need are vertex colors, first and foremost. And if you're on anything that has grass, you're going to want to add your grass renderer, right? That's the 3DG. And you're going to want to have a collider. So those are things, default materials sets in the script that we're going to do by ourselves. And this works the same way, doing it with everything. So here's our fairway. And you can do this at the same time as you set the material itself, right? So if we do all our fairway meshes, once you have them all, you can drag over your material. Now we're going to add a few components. We're going to add, you just search. This is how it comes up. Go add component, search. We're going to type in vertex, and we're going to do show vertex colors. So that adds our vertex colors in there. And then we're going, and it says, you can see it doesn't look the same. It says multi-object editing not supported. That means that it just isn't showing everything about that because we have multiple meshes selected. No big deal. Then we're also going to want to add a collider. So we're going to go mesh collider. And when you add that, it will automatically find the FBX file and put it in there. You can't see it because we have multi-selected, but trust me, it's there. Then what you're going to want to do from there is also add, well, no, we don't need 3DG because we're on fairways right now. The other component that I don't believe set default materials adds that I'm going to add if I have anything that's going to have 3DG is going to be vertex instance stream. let's move over to that so I can show you why. So here's a rough shape. You can see here it's rough mesh. So let's just do this. We're going to do rough, whoops, mesh. All right, so now we have our rough meshes. We're going to select all those. We're going to go down and find our fold rough, drag it over. There we go. Okay. And then we are going to add our collider, right? And then in here, material, physics material, we'll click on this. We're going to add rough. So now all of those have the rough physics, right? We're going to add our show vertex colors, and we're going to add our grass render, which is 3DG, right? Now, while it's all still selected, I'm going to go in here and find my 3D grass. So fold 3DG, drop that in there, just like that. And now you can see we have our 3DG and everything on that mesh. Now, I have not completed the sat shading and material setups for this, so I'm not too concerned with the way it looks, if it's good or not. But that is how you get everything set quickly on every individual mesh. Now, I talked about wanting to add one more thing that I don't think set mesh gives you, but is important for 3DG. That is Vertex instance stream. So you can search for, again, you can just search for Vertex or instance, and you might recognize it. If I just click on one, you'll see, where did I put it? Here, it's down here. So update paint and geometry button and our bake vertex painting. So you need this if you're going to do vertex painting inside of Unity. I do a lot of mine in Blender, but some in Unity. So for instance, if I wanted some areas of my rough to not have 3DG because it's a dry area or whatever, if I go to my vertex painter, I'm going to just grab black quick, and I'm going to see, hopefully this all works. I think my 3DG is set up so that black will not be. Let's just show data. So this is all red vertex right now, the whole mesh. So if I turn that on and I do some black painting in here. All right, if I turn that off, oh, see now, I forgot to turn on hide. And I just don't think I have that material set up. Oh yeah, I have it set up as like a pebble right now. So you can see that I have a different material underneath there, but my 3DG is still drawing, right? Why is my 3DG on an area that's black? Because that's supposed to be how we paint it out. If you even look at my 3DG rough setup, you can see I'm a 3 texture vertex density, and if you go down to the last slot, the grass type 4 is gray, meaning it's not being used, and that is the black color. So it shouldn't be drawing 3DG. Why? Why is it? We need to bake the vertex painting to the mesh. Right now it's still pulling the data from the FBX file that we exported from Blender. So it's pulling that vertex color data. If we bake it inside here, now 3DG, the grass render script, will see that as black. So that's why we added that component. We click bake and the grass disappears. And now you can see we have this pebbly material underneath that we didn't really, I didn't really intend for that, but that's just to show you quick how that works. If you want it to look the same but just not have the grass on it, you can use your channel editor. And what this does, I've shown in a few others, this is what I use all the time for material setup. This is how I do it for creating blends, but it also works this way. Say you've got your rough, and we know that the red vertex data is the regular material, but I'm going to copy it to itself. So I'm going to grab rough twice. So I'm going to copy the red channel to the black. Now, when I copy this, the material looks the same, even though the vertex color is different. But we don't have any grass drawing there. It's a little tough to see, I think. There, if I go back to single mesh lighting, you can see a little better. So it looks the same as the material underneath, but no grass there because we painted it black. All right, so that is gives you an idea of the quick ways to set up mass materials to all your stuff without using set mesh, and it gives you a look at some of the components that most of your XPX files are going to need that you'll have to do manually since it's not using set mesh. And now let's run over quick and see why, and I think I've talked about this in other videos, but why it is that I don't necessarily use the default blends. And the whole reason I don't use set default materials is because I don't want default blends. So let's look at this water base and compare it to the other one. We haven't added our components. Really the only thing I want quick is the show vertex colors. So what you've got, this is how it gets meshed and painted. This is default. The water base has a blue bottom, then it goes green, red, and then you've got your blend shape, which is going to be black and red like all auto blends. And then you've got your deep rough that surrounds stuff, right? Okay, so if we hide the colors and then we make this our deep rough. So there's our deep rough, there's our water. I'm not even going to use the water blend. And the reason I don't use the water-based blend, and I also don't use the auto blend shape when I transition from regular rough to deep rough or some other places, is because I want a softer blend. The entire blend happens in this small window, and that's great for places that are mowed. So a fairway up against rough, rough up against deep rough. That's a mow line. The transition from one length grass to the other happens in a tiny amount of space in real life as well. The auto blends work great for that. But if we're transitioning from water, muddy, rocky bed to a grassier growing area, if you look at that in the real world, that transition does not happen like a mow line. That transition happens over a varying and wider distance. The grass slowly kind of gets thinner and changes to mud, or there might be spots where it's uneven. It's not a perfect line. It kind of goes back and forth. So this is the whole reason that I do things this way. I want a different type of blend. So if I go into Blender and look at this, here's what I do. I go in here and I take my blend and then I shift click on that. I hit Control J. I join them. I go into my vertexes and select all of them and I merge them so that now this is all one shape. I also don't need more than one material, so I go over here, I delete my blend. I always just want only that, and then I go back to vertex mode, and again, I'm going fast, but this is all stuff I cover in other videos too. I'm going to select all these loops and I'm going to slide them just to space them out further. I don't want them so tight because I want the blend to happen slowly, okay? All right, so now I just have one shape. Let's look at one that we already did over here. So this is the other water base I've already done. And if you look over, this is the water plane I added manually so I could see where the water level was going to be. If I look at my colors, you can see I've changed so that my muddy lake bottom is black. Then I go to green, then I go to blue. So in this case, blue color is the one that butts up against the red color of my deep rough. So if we look at this without that on, we have deep rough, lake bed, no blend in between. So we're going to set it up so that our blue perimeter color is the same visual material as the red vertex color of deep rough, so that the blend is perfect right here. And because there's so much room between the vertices of these loops, we have a softer, slower change, okay? And then the green material, let's go back and look in Unity at that. All right, so we're over here looking, and I'm going to turn off my grass on my deep rough so you can see it. So you can see that we're changing. This is all the water-based shape, but that blue vertex color is the blend. It matches with the deep rough. Then I have the green vertex color, which is just a more lush, long grass, just because I figured, hey, it's closer to water, it's probably better hydrated, or maybe I want to change that and that's where I'm planning to plant like reeds or bulrushes or something like that. So I just want a little different look underneath than what the prairie grass base material would be. Now in here, after I have my water level established, that's when I'm going to go in with and do vertex painting inside here. So I'm going to grab green, I'll make it a little smaller, change my flow. So now that I know where my water level is going to be a little better, now I can go in and do a more natural, let's crank that up, and I'm going to paint in my green vertex color in here now that I can see kind of where that is. And then if I want my prairie grass to come down a little farther, I'm going to change to blue, which is that, right? And I can do that. So even though that's all within the lake base, it allows me flexibility on that blend. And instead of that blend happening in that tight little window like a mow line, it's a very gentle transition, right? And that's the entire reason why I don't use set mesh, because in some areas I do not want to do my blends with the automatic blend shape. I want to do them on my own so I have control. Now if I want them to be tighter, you can still change that inside right over here on the channel blend strength. So if I changed my green strength up, you're going to see more of it, but you're also, if you go to the blue, you're also going to get a tight line if you want it, if you make the blends strong. But if you back off the blends, that's when you're able to get that more gentle transition. So you have all that power at your fingertips if you're not doing it with the auto shapes. So that's my general theory and how I go about setting things without using set mesh, and some of the small tricks that I use in Unity to be able to do it faster. Again, the difference between rough and deep rough doesn't have an auto blend to begin with, but I want that to blend, obviously. So if we look at somewhere where I've already finished preparing it, you can see right here that I've got here's my deep rough shape, and my deep rough has a green perimeter which matches the color of my regular rough. If I turn off that, so then you've got a transition from standard rough to prairie grass. And in some courses that might look like a mow line. In mine, I want it to be a more natural transition. Once again, that can be controlled with the strength of the blend. So if I wanted that to be a sharp line, I could, like that. Then you have a sharper definition there. But you have the control over that this way. So, and then if I turn my grass back on, you should see a pretty soft transition. And of course, all my prairie grass will eventually be planted with like GSPro or something like that. So it'll be a mix of 3DG in that. So there you go. This was supposed to be a little shorter than it ended up, but I wanted to do one that I've never done before. I've kind of deep dived into how I do all this extreme blender work and things like that, but maybe I felt like I had never explained why or how I go about setting things up without going through the default tools. So hopefully that was helpful. This is probably the first video you should have watched or should watch before you do all the other stuff. It'll give you a better scope of why I go through all this extra work. Thanks for watching.